Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Dadas Show, coming to you from Ma Hotel and Suites here in Nairobi. I'm your host, Ashiko Mbune. The Dadas Show aspires to promote the spirit of solidarity amongst the Kenyan women. And we do this by creating a safe and an open platform for women to share issues pertaining to their health, their well-being, their lifestyle, their careers, and everything in general. Now, on this first part of our two-part series in our fight to break down the stigma related to women's health and transition processes, we shall be taking a deeper look into a conversation that has taken the world by storm. Now, a few weeks ago, Senator Gloria Orwoba walked into Parliament with this dazzling, very, very classy white pantsuit that, of course, had an apparent period stain on her trousers. This brought forth a number of very adverse reactions, especially for maybe her fellow parliamentarians, even women asking for her removal. So such terms such as disrespectful and indecent were thrown around, to which the senator responded, and I quote, "Since I am always advocating against period shaming, I thought I should go ahead and walk the talk." The brave actions of Senator Gloria have sparked conversations on period shaming across multiple forums, and the Dadas Show is not one to be left behind. It's actually a shame that in this day and age, when we are so open to speak about gender malleability, conversations around periods and menopause are still considered taboo, but not here. So today I am joined by the one and the only Senator Gloria Orwoba, whose extreme measures have sparked conversation in order to inspire change. As always, we encourage you at home to take part in this conversation by sharing your views, your comments, your feedback. What did you think of the extreme measures that she took? What else do you feel? What are the areas you feel like people really need to step out of their comfort zone so that a message can be sent home? So interact with us on all our social media platforms at KBC Channel 1. So before we jump into this extremely exciting conversation, let's have a look at the following feature.
Menstruation is the monthly shedding of the uterus lining. Otherwise known as menses, menstrual period or menstrual cycle, it is triggered by hormones and it lasts between 3 to 7 days.
Menstruation is a biological process whereby women, that happens once a month to women, whereby the uterus, which has prepared itself for conceiving, doesn't happen. So it shades off and blood comes out through the uterus. Yeah, that's menstruation.
While it is experienced by almost all women of reproductive age, it is a widely stigmatized topic affecting mostly girls and women in rural areas and informal settlements.
My opinion on period shaming is I feel that mostly comes from men because we don't understand. And I think as a society, the generation above us needed to teach us better, to make us understand what is this and what it's all about, so that when our ladies face through such things, because it comes on a monthly period. So once we understand what it is and how we can be supportive with our women, I think the stigma would have been reduced because we understand much better our role as gentlemen and how we can support our ladies. When it comes to period poverty, I believe the motion Senator, I can't remember the name, but the lady had a motion to say that period, Gloria Orwoba, the menstrual pad should be given for free. And I agree with that.
In 2004, Kenya became the first country globally to eliminate period product taxes, yet even untaxed, pads and tampons still remain unaffordable for many.
Period poverty is real. It's happening, and because period products are very expensive. For example, pads are very expensive, and most people, even in marginalized communities, cannot afford the products. Even in hostels, I'm sure people can't afford. And it's real in Kenya, and I would like to give the government a challenge to make sure that they facilitate the period products to be available for everyone. even if it's coming up with cheaper means for people to be able to afford, because many girls are not attending schools, are not functional, because during the periods they are not having things to facilitate their periods. And I would like to give the government a challenge to make sure that period products are available to all, even if it's making cheap, and make sure that they are given in universities, schools for free.
Additionally, sanitation continues to be an issue that is not well addressed, making menstrual hygiene difficult. While period poverty is still present in Kenya, the government and relevant stakeholders both need to address this issue from different angles, as it will not only help in the management of periods, but also in securing a brighter tomorrow.
Menstruation is a natural phenomena, and that we should not take it against women. It's not like it's something which can be prevented. It's something which it was designed by God for them to undergo. So the only thing that we are able to do as a society is to cope with the situation, to also not alienate women in regards to the situation they are encountering. It's like a normal challenge for every human being.
The government should avail affordable pads, sanitary towels in all schools, so it covers even the poor in the society and everyone else.
Welcome back. So as mentioned, I am joined by the one, the only. I feel like I should have drum rolls. I've been so excited about this episode. Like drum rolls, please. Senator Gloria Orwoba. And before we jump into the conversation, I also do want to acknowledge my wonderful audience. Thank you so, so much for taking time off your busy schedule to join me on the Dadas show as we discuss this very pertinent issue, especially in our fight against the stigma that is related to women's health care and, you know, the transition that women take place. Why is this conversation so hard for us to find? But now, to get the ball rolling and to be able to answer these questions, I'll start off with you, Mheshimiwa. Now, off the cuff, I have to say that, you know, I'm your number one fan. I mean, if it's not obvious to everybody at home, I'm your number one fan, because I believe, like even some of members of the audience, myself, we always want to believe that we are, you know, the advocates of development and social change. And we like to believe that we stand up for what we believe in. But I think you took everything to a whole new level. And I'm curious, what was your thought process when you were adorning that dazzling white pantsuit? What was your thought? Where was your head at that morning?
It was a very normal day, by the way. I know that there's a conversation around that it was stage managed, but actually I had a very good morning that day. And when you see me wearing white or red, I'm having one of my best days of the week.
Of course. Yeah,
like it's a thing. I'm like, hey, watch an Ivae red, or, you know. So I had a good morning. And then when the stain happened, I actually wanted to go back to the car. But then, like I said, you know how you have a conversation with yourself? Like when something happens to you and then you're like, you want to take the normal reaction that everyone does, but because you want to be a change, you have to sort of remind yourself, way. Yeah, so it's not, you know, the funny thing is that when I had you introduce me and all that, I was listening like I'm a third party. Like, hey, kitu ni kubwa. The accidents I've had before, I've had them, nobody made a big deal about it because, of course, I was not in Senate. Yes. So I get the idea of how that became sort of like loud conversation because of the fact that I was in Senate. Yes. But, you know, that's a normal occurrence for many women at work, many women in the markets, schoolgirls. In fact, I think for me, it's just shocking that it took just a normal woman to just show what normally happens.
Yes.
and maybe the house was being in parliament was now the thing that highlighted it. But that's, a lot of women go through that every day. So I was listening and I'm like, wow, this sounds like I ran a marathon and then and then I won or something, but really I just had my period, and I happened to have a conversation with myself in the parking, like, don't go back home, you've been advocating to change this, walk the talk. And I was a bit nervous, let's say like the first couple of steps, and then it was more like, whatever happens, happens. I'm going for the session, and this is not going to be an issue that will make my day stop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also love the fact that you do have a tagline that says, you know, anything you can do, I can do bleeding.
So, you know, I went to talk to a couple of girls a while back, before all of this, in Kibera. And we wanted to highlight some of the stories, because I've been dealing with period poverty from as far back as 2008.
Yes.
So it's been an ongoing process. We were working on a documentary, actually, that was a partnership between one of the NGOs that I work with and another NGO. So we went to Kibera and we were shooting like the stories of girls who were coming out to say that they've engaged in sex work because they needed essential items, one of the items being sanitary towels. So how that picture came about, there's a picture of me if you go online, I'm in Kibera and I'm like talking to someone or something, and then the t-shirt has anything you can do, I can do bleeding.
Yes.
So when this happened in parliament, the picture started rotating. Like, it's a picture that had already been shared within our circles. And someone was like, in fact, to me your picture. So then suddenly it became like a sensational, like a...
So it actually was, you know, true testament that you are walking the talk. You know, you're not just, because if this is something that had already happened prior to the incident in Parliament, and so it comes to show that your commitment to the cause.
I've always, so for me, this whole period poverty and period shaming is something I've always championed in my small space, and for clarity, actually, it was, I had my period.
Yes.
And there was a stain, but it was more of, if I go back home, then what am I teaching? Like, you're the same person who's bringing a bill, we want to legislate things around period shaming, and you're going to go back home. So, you know, sometimes in theory, the things that we are championing look like we can do it. Yes. But practically, you know, when you go to talk to girls in the villages and you're telling them, you must come out and speak against certain issues, you're talking about it in theory. But how many ladies would actually have the stain and say, I'm going to go ahead and continue with my day? So for me, that was the intentional part, the part where I decided I'm not going to go and change. This is going to be an intentional approach to show you that what we are pushing for with the girls not being kicked out of schools because they have stained their clothes, you know, I can also walk the talk. So first of all, I think one thing it taught me is, in theory, a lot of things sound very super. But the backlash that I've received, even in the house, just for walking the talk, is the reason why many girls and women will still fall back into ensuring they're afraid that if I take a bold, you know, statement or action, what will happen? I'm the one who's, individually, I'm the one who's dealing with the backlash. Individually, I'm the one who's dealing with a lot of things. I was taken out of committees. You know, like, a lot of it is like real when you actually do it. But when you stand and you speak in theory and we must end this, we might, I would challenge a lot of people to just walk the talk for even one day and see how it feels to be in that situation. And
I believe that's the reason why the movement has actually caught on. Because as anybody can even attest here in our audience, everybody has been able to, everyone has spotted. There's no one who can sit and say from the moment you began having your period, that everything has always been like smooth going. You know, everybody has spotted, everybody has had an oops here and there. And what do we do? Like you said, it's very easy in theory talking about, you know, if I do this, I'll walk around, I'll hold my head high. But I most probably would have been the first one looking for a sweater. And I've been telling people, cut, I need to go and hide away. So the fact that you were bold enough, and then the kind of reaction that it instigated after that is the reason that this conversation is being had. And it's even the reason why we are having it, you know, on Dadas show. Because not to shame anybody who had a different opinion or who had a different outlook to what you did, but it brought forth a conversation that we need to be having. Why is it considered that something that is such a natural process? If anything, you know, this is for a woman, it's what signifies your womanhood. This is where you're starting. You are getting into your childbearing years. It should be something that is celebrated. And you know, this is coming in light of when there's a young girl who was insulted, or who was, I don't know the story fully, but it's something that we discussed earlier, about a young girl who really, you know, she was insulted or she was really bullied by a teacher. A teacher nonetheless,
The girl who had her period, and then she spotted and stained her dress. Yes. And a teacher just made a comment. And so for the girl, it was shameful because it was a comment made in public with the other students there. And the shame was too much that she actually committed suicide.
She actually committed suicide. So that is actually a true story that happened when you're talking about a girl being shamed by a teacher. And remember, we talk about the teachers are not supposed to react. They're supposed to respond. And what happened? The girl is shamed and then she kills herself. So when we are talking about, you know, developmental and social changes, we need actions such as yours. And now on the topic of developmental and social changes, aside from the fight against period shaming, what other goals do you have? Because now you're a person of interest, and if it is on forum, let's hear more about this senator. You know, what gets her going? What are some of your goals?
So generally, I've been, my background is in the NGO. Yes. I have some technical background in architecture and construction work, but mostly social work and the NGO world is where I come from. So I've been working around youth empowerment in social enterprises. You know, everyone says, oh, we need to create jobs. Jobs are created by, you know, putting up businesses. Yeah. So I've been in that space for a while. In terms of gender empowerment, we've been working with women to scale up their businesses. We've been working with women to deal with certain issues within, like, for instance, gender-based violence. You know, it's easy to say, like, usikae kwa ndoa where you're being beaten, but the practical thing, again, is, okay, so I'm leaving this man, where am I going? How am I going to? So we've been doing the work that people don't want to talk about, the work behind the scenes. So, you know, women empowerment sounds, it's a nice buzzword topic, and we'll say, we'll give women capital to start businesses. But most of the women who actually get the capital, why it fails, they don't have the capacity in terms of setting up the business. Some have the capacity, but they don't have, so you look at their backgrounds, they are coming from marriages that are really abusive. So while they're trying to run this business that is thriving, they miss 2 or 3 days because they've been beaten, they're at home. You look at certain women who maybe got married early, so they have missed out on their youthful years, on the things that you'd ordinarily do between the ages of 18 and 25. So you find that by the time they're 25, they have like 6 children, but they're still trying to you know, tap back into the things they did. So there's a lot of, like, for you to have a program that is successful and sustainable, and you can have success stories that are not just for show. Yes. There's so much that needs to be done behind the scenes other than just throwing money at women or saying that we are exposing them by taking them to workshops. So I've been involved in those kind of programs. And so even this menstruation bit that has come in, it's something that I've been doing since 2008. So we've been dealing with teenage pregnancies. A lot of the teenage pregnancies come from, you know, commercial sex work for to get money to be able to buy pads and things like that. So that's something that's close to my heart, like, because I also got married when I was young, but by choice and not by not by circumstance. And I remember that time when I was involved in that program, I was meeting my peers, but they had like 4 or 5 kids at 22. So I was trying to figure out, by the time you have 4 or 5 kids at 20, 21, 22, wow, you must have started like at 14 or something. So, and it's a space that, by virtue of being a woman, I understand and I feel like I can do more. So I've dedicated so much of my time towards it. Yes. But I also have a background in ICT. I actually came back in 2019 to Kenya from managing the Facebook data center in Denmark. So of course I have some legislation that touches on data protection and just the ICT space and how we can ensure that we have, again, women included in that space. So I'm the chair of the Women MPs in ICT caucus. It's a parliamentary caucus. What we try and do is, you know, they say 99% of the future jobs are going to be digital. Yes. So who's going to have those jobs? If the women are not digital, they don't have the capacity, they're not in that space, it means automatically we've said 99% of the jobs in the future will go to men.
Are going to go to men.
Yeah,
exactly.
so I try, somehow within everything that I try to do, somehow there's always the angle of how do we have inclusivity of women. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, that's really well put in terms of your goals. So you've mentioned some of the few projects that you're working on and some of the goals that you have. But since you came into Senate in 2022, what are some of the notable achievements so that we can see, aside from strutting in that white suit, what are some of the notable achievements?
So let me take you just one step behind. Since I vied for Member of Parliament for Bobasi constituency, I'm the first woman to vie for that seat. Wow. And since I stepped out and publicly said I'm vying and I don't care and I'm not going for women's seat, this is the seat I want, I spurred up a lot of other women within KC to vie.
That's fantastic.
So in fact, I pride myself and I take this, and I think women should normalize owning their stuff, you know. I pride myself in the fact that when there was a by-election in Bonchari constituency, I literally went against all the odds to ensure that the party leader put a woman. And this was way before we got into the scene in terms of now. And for me, it was more like, if we don't start fighting to put women in those places, who's going to fight for us, you know? So at that point, I was in a position of influence within the party, and there were 3 candidates being fronted, one of them being Cliff Ombeta, the good lawyer, and then there was the wife to the late MP. So I said, guys, this lady has worked, she knows about campaign, she's the engine behind the late MP, she's the one who's been mobilizing through the churches, through what, and I was like, why would you not put her just because she's the wife? Let her run for the seat. And that also sort of, women within the KC County, if you go and see from when the Bonchari by-election, the candidates were declared, then you start seeing from that point, you'll see we had now women coming to vie.
So there was an upsurge of women participation in
And you know, because
politics,
you know UDA is a big party, so for UDA to give that ticket to a woman in KC, no other party had given up to that point, had given a woman in KC to vie. No other party, like in the history of political parties, they would not give a woman in KC. So having convinced the party leader to give, then it also was like, oh wow, so we can get tickets. So then the other one started declaring that I'm vying for this and this seat, MCAs and what. So at least I can say up to there, even if I didn't achieve much.
Yes.
At least the women.
That's a very notable achievement, by the way, Mheshimiwa. That is a notable
like, at least that
achievement.
One
that one I did.
Yeah, and then in Senate, I wouldn't say I've achieved a lot yet. We are on the journey, but I have one of my bills, the Konza bill, that has already made it to the floor of the House on the first reading. So being like the second session, I would say that's an achievement, because I hear it takes up to 2 years for a bill to reach the House. So I'm like, okay, good, we are doing good. I have a bill on, of course, the sanitary towels, and that's still, I have my motion today. I mean, I have my motion going to Parliament. So I'm trying to figure out how to fast track the bill.
Yes.
And then I have a bill in Swahili for immigrants. Because this is purely based on my experiences outside. So if you go to other countries, they're like, you must learn our language, you must, before we give you paperwork. But if you come to Kenya, you're given paperwork, like literally, like, unataka residency. So what happens is that we are losing our culture, we are losing our language, because we're actually not taking intentional steps to preserve it. So I have that bill. I have a bill on data protection. Which is, I'm trying to bring back the jobs to Kenya.
Yes.
Anytime you use your social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, the data is stored outside. When it's stored outside in a cloud, it means that cloud exists physically somewhere else and it's not in Kenya. So we have exported our jobs. So I'm trying to geographically legislate that any data that is generated by the Kenyans should be stored in Kenya. So therefore, all these companies will be forced to store their data in Kenya, in which case we will have to put up a lot of data centers, which creates jobs, our ICT levels. So it's more about on the job creation. Yes. So I think those are 5. No?
Yeah, those are 5 bills. But I want to take you back to the sanitary, the sanitary towel provision bill. Tell us a little bit more about that one, because that is something that is close to what we are speaking about today.
You know, people are saying, there's nothing new. We already have a law. That's true. We have an amendment that was inserted in the Education Act.
Yes.
And it's a 1-paragraph thing. because you know periods ni za nini, si watupie tu paragraph moja hapo kwa Education Act. That's the way the issues of menstruation have been taken. Not seriously, not dedicated, no intention. So there's an amendment act that has been put in the Education Act that says that there will be provision of sanitary towels to schoolgirls.
Yes.
But implementation of the same cannot be done. Because the way the law has been drafted, it does not direct certain things like the frequency. How many times do they distribute? So previously they do once a year, and they give you like 5, and it's not old school, they give like 5 packets to 7 packets of pads. 1 pack is, so when you do the calculation, we have periods every month.
Yeah, it's not going to work. It's not,
yeah. So it's not well thought through.
Yeah.
And then there's the issue of course, the frequency, and then all schools should get. Right now, it's just been certain schools. But even if it's certain schools, which we understand maybe budgetary allocation cannot cover, who decides which schools? So
that's a good question.
Yeah, and there's a lot of loose ends, like who decides which schools, how do they do the procurement? Are we pushing the local manufacturers when we are procuring? Most of the times not. Most of the times people are importing from China, which is a big conversation now, and I think it should be, because period poverty is pushed by the fact that there's poverty.
Yes.
To deal with the poverty, you must create jobs and have people earning money. But if you're now importing things, especially sanitary towels from China, well, our local manufacturers who are, like, I'll give you an example. There's a pack, I don't want to give the names, from a local manufacturer that goes for 45 shillings. After them struggling with the import tax on the raw material, they still managed to put the pack at 45 shillings. Yeah? Then there are 2 major companies, which even when we distribute, those are the things you see, the pads you see. Their pads are going for 70 shillings minimum for 8. Right? And those are imported. Yeah. So you can imagine the profit margins of this one who's selling at 70 shillings, whereas they're importing tax-free, and this one who's locally manufacturing, but their material is taxed, and they've still struggled to bring it down at 45. When you go to the shelf, this one, and this is a challenge I want to give all the girls, when you go to the supermarket, there will always be that shelf, and they try to put them like
at the bottom.
Yeah, the bottom.
I've actually noticed that, and that's the one that should be right at the top. That's what we should be promoting.
And that's the one that like retails at 45 shillings to 50, 45, 47, 50. And then the ones that are imported that are not locally manufactured go between 70 to 100, 120 even. Those are the ones that are now on your eye-level shelf. Now, the ones at 45 to 50, which are still good quality, those are locally manufactured. But even the sense with which now even us as women go to pick, you don't know that. Yeah. So you'll automatically be like, hizi ni mbaya, these ones are the ones are there, and you're promoting
Kwanza vile zimefichwa huko chini.
So, and then now, unfortunately, when it comes to procurement, those between 70 to 100 are the ones that are being procured, which are being imported. So, in short, what we're saying, you're going to keep the people poor by killing the local manufacturers, and then you still end up with the period poverty, which you're dealing with forever.
Yes, and it looks like it's a snake eating its own tail. Yes, and we are stuck in a loop.
So what I would want to do is, once the bill is passed, and I really have to lobby. You saw the reactions at the floor of the House.
I did.
Those are the same people I have to lobby to support the bill. Yeah. People who think the bill shouldn't even exist. So I mean, it's going to be an uphill task. It's going to be a big battle. The one thing that I'm happy about is that the president is so much supportive of what I'm doing and this initiative. The minister, the cabinet secretary for gender, Aisha Juma, is very supportive. But you know, when you come down to legislation, it's parliament.
It's the numbers. You do need the numbers. I know since we're speaking even of challenges, let me ask you one final question before we interact with the audience. What are some of, we witnessed as Kenyans some of the challenges full front, and I think that's why everybody was like, what? Is this actually happening? Because like we say, it's very easy to think about something theoretically, then you look at it and you're like, I can't believe someone said that, I can't believe someone said that. So at the end of the day, there's that challenge that we witness, full view of Kenyans. All Kenyan women saw it, and some of us are up in arms, some of us are like, maybe it's as it should be. What are some of the other challenges that you have experienced, especially in regards to when you're lobbying? Of course I understand the numbers, the reactions.
Generally, as a nominated senator, man or woman, you already have so many challenges in the House because we are like, I hate to say this, but really we are like second-class citizens in the house because you're nominated. So there's always this thing of where ulipewa kiti, you don't even know.
You didn't work for it.
Yeah, you didn't work for it.
Yeah.
So don't bring us whatever you're bringing us. So already there's that, anytime you approach anyone, it's like you're already approaching from a position of less influence because you're nominated. And then as a woman, it's like 3 times worse because there's an expectation that, first of all, as a woman in the house, you shouldn't be vocal. There is an expectation. And people don't realize, like on the outside you can't realize, but that's what it is. So the moment you are like a vocal person, you're already considered
a disruption of some sort.
Yeah, it's not in the positive light. You know, like in school, when we were in primary school or high school, there was always the noisemaker, who every teacher is like, and I know you noisemakers, sit down. Have you done your homework? I want to see all your homework. And you start with the noisemakers because there's a perception the noisemakers are just horrible people. Troublemakers, and they've not done their homework and they are not contributing to the class. It's the same thing in parliament. So there's the issue of how to handle that, and then now throw in the challenge of course, you'll bring in bills that are supporting, like now this sanitary towel thing.
Yes.
So it becomes, first of all, you're coming from a place of we've judged you before even you came to parliament. And then now you've come to parliament with your period.
By that, with your periods.
That's why even the contributions on that day, it was not necessarily the issue, but there was like, it was coming from a place of disgust. It wasn't just the action, it was more like, first of all, you don't even belong here. We have just allowed you. And now, instead of accepting that we've just allowed you, you're going ahead to kututukana. You know, you disrespect. There was someone said you're disgracing us. So you can imagine, by the time they have to pass that perception and then now listen, now tell us what is it you're saying. It takes so much energy to stay focused, and unfortunately, not everyone has it.
Yes.
So there are very many focused nominated senators who, because they don't have that, it's not resilience, you need to just, it's like someone just hitting at you, but you're so focused that you have to just ignore this. And at one point, I understand why some people say, I pick my battles, and I'm not going to pick that battle. Because there's a fatigue.
And I can imagine it's extremely demoralizing if you constantly have to be dealing with that, and it's an up
every single day.
Over and over again. And I'm so sure at this particular point, the audience have like a million of questions, especially in light of what we've discussed. So we're going to take a very, very short break, and then we'll come back for the question and answer session. Please don't go far away. Welcome back. So before the break, we had an opportunity, and actually for me, it's a privilege to interact with Senator Gloria. And we've really dug into issues. And I really hope that this is an eye-opening moment for people who are at home, even for the legislator, even for members of parliament, to understand what Kenyans really, really feel. And to dig deeper about what Kenyans and what women really feel about this issue, we are going to jump into the question and answer session where our interactive audience will get an opportunity to actually ask questions to our senator. To start us off, we have Celia. Celia, karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Helen. Before I get to my questions, just to say how much you're an inspiration, not only to women, to people like me who've been in the space for communication and advocacy for many years. And what you just did is, you know, we get inspired. We usually need a sort of apprenticeship where somebody can walk ahead of us, and that was really an inspiration. So my question is, you've talked about it a little bit, but I want to focus on it because I feel like that's the heart of the whole quote-unquote saga, other than opening up the conversation, which is great, because for anything, you know, in policy advocacy work, you have to get the conversation going for even something to happen. Now, what I know is, to the general public, is that I'm glad you mentioned that the bill exists. I know many people have been asking, does it exist? Is it something you're bringing new to the House? You said it exists, but it was an amendment that was not well thought through. It was just some adjustment that was done, but a lot of things were not done effectively enough for us to have the output that we want. So my question is, I know you mentioned things like frequency. You also mentioned who decides what goes to what. I think my what I'd really like to understand is, now that I know you're pushing it in Parliament, how then should this bill look like so that we are able to get the intended results outside of the way it looks like now? What other things really need to be part of the bill so that now, when it's passed, eventually ascended, and that we are able to see a real change with the girls on the ground? So just really focusing on that in a bit more detail. I hope I'm clear enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Celia. I think I'm also curious about what are the parameters right now of the bill? And
so what exists is a law which was passed, an amendment within the Education Act. And I want to put a standalone act for free sanitary towel provision so that it covers issues on frequency. If they're going to do it once a year, we should stipulate that once a year, each girl gets 12 packets at minimum, for instance, because that covers every month, at least 1 pack a month. One of the other things I'm trying to figure out is, even if we can't legislate a minimum provision percentage of how much budgetary allocation goes towards that, if we can find a way to regulate through the Finance Act or something, I'm being guided by the lawyers on how to say that at least we are sure, even at a very bad economic time, a certain hundreds, millions will be given towards sanitary provision. And also behind the scenes, there's the issue of the quality. Like, women will tell you, there's some products that are just bad.
Yes.
And no one right now, KBS, yes, of course, is there, but KBS really can't. We should be the one who own that space, because we are the ones who can tell you, this one gives me infections, this one makes me itch. There's the issue of renewable, reusable sanitary towels, which can work in certain areas, but should actually be restricted from other areas.
Exactly.
Because areas where they don't have water, you should not, even as an NGO, we should not be forcing, we should actually be saying you cannot take reusable sanitary towels in certain areas because they already have issues of water. So how are they going to wash those pads? So in fact, you're actually aiding some other
more
issues,
problems and infections,
problems. Yeah, so, and no one is talking about that. We have new items like the cups, There's a lot of, there are lots of misunderstood issues around the cups, the menstrual cups.
Yes.
Me being one of them, because I have people donating them to me, but I'm like, okay, how are we going to teach the girls to use them? One, there is a notion that they are breaking their virginities by using the cups.
Yes.
So we also, as much as we are adopting everything to deal with period poverty, we also have to understand we are in Kenya, and we need to, before you introduce a product or before you introduce something that is supposed to deal with the period poverty, the community has to have the buy-in. So there are areas you can take the cups, and in fact, they only want the cups. They're saying, I just want that one because I need 1 cup, I'll be washing it, I use it throughout for 4 years, I'm okay. But there are areas where it is actually seen as a sort of, you are actually bringing in something that our culture does not. So we need to find ways that are approachable and that will have a sustainable solution. Because I think if you give someone a reusable pad, they're not able to wash it properly, and then they later get UTIs and other infections because of that. You have actually put that girl in more problems than you have taken them away from the period poverty.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's really well put. And I think my prayer is once everything has been cleaned up and everything has been firmed up, all the parameters have been put in place, I feel like it is going to be a very, very, extremely effective bill. And I wish we could participate as Dadas Show to push it.
Yes, you should, because we are going to have a public participation, at which point forums like this are needed, so that people can give their feedback on certain things. Perhaps they're saying we don't care, maybe just allow the youth to have the 30% of procurement, even if they're bringing the pads from China, blah, blah. So that public participation is definitely necessary, and forums like this actually will be, when we get there, I hope that you'd be able to participate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic, and it's also important for our viewers at home. Remember that public forums, like Mheshimiwa is saying, are very, very crucial for the accession of some of these bills. So do not sit and mope in silence. When you hear about a role that the public can actually play so that you can have your rights implemented, then it's important for you to actually step up to the plate. Our next question comes from Sarah. Sarah, karibu sana.
Thank you. It's a pleasure meeting you, Mheshimiwa. Mine stems off from what has just been said about the public participation. And this, for me, is women soberly supporting other women. So as a professional in the medical field, how can we support you in this agenda that you're pushing right now?
That's wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, the idea of women supporting women is a bit of theory. I don't want to say, it's very theoretical, because I think people support the things that they are interested in. And sometimes women are not interested in certain things. So I don't want to be the person that says, oh, it's only women who put me down and whatever. I feel like we should have that idea just set aside, because nobody says men for men. And when men fight men, nobody says men are fighting men. People just say it's a competition. But when like a woman is competing with another woman, they always say like, you know, oh, women don't support their own. So I feel like it's always, but thank you for telling me that the medical profession, they're actually supporting me in this. And I think one of the things that you can do, one, when it comes to public participation, if you can actually chime in, because from a professional medical perspective, like I said, I don't even know the side effects, if there are any, of some of these menstrual hygiene products, right? And I would like for the medical, for doctors to like take an approach where they're saying, with our information as doctors, this is what we can provide in terms of sanitary towels, in terms of tampons, reusable pads, because reusable pads, they're now coming in different forms. Some are cotton, some are nylon, some are what. So like, if you can shed light in terms of advocacy on that and how we can use the products without harming ourselves, I think there's a big gap there. Like, personally, I think a more sustainable solution that we can afford as a country would be the menstrual cups. Because it's like when you enter Form 1, you come with your mattress, right? Then you enter Form 1, I give you a cup. I don't have to deal with you till Form 4, you know, because it's the same cup.
Yeah.
But then there's so much that is misunderstood. And even that is understood, like personally, I have experienced it and I'm like, I'm not sure if I can use this because of ABCD. And there's just like a big dark cloud around it. So if the medical, because you people now are coming from a professional perspective, if you could help us understand all these products loudly, so that we can make an informed decision. So that when I'm going to the supermarket and I'm saying, I'm not going to use tampons, I'm making it from an informed position, because I also had like, it depends on also those, there are people who have heavy flow or whatever flow, there are people who have certain, like if you have fibroids, you shouldn't use, there's so much around that reproductive health space. So, and I personally, even as I'm pushing this, I'm always constantly trying to find out more about it. And I know that many women and girls, won't answer, they can't tell you, why do you use pads and not tampons? Why don't you use the cup? They can't give you an answer because they don't know. Maybe they just started using pads because their first period they were given a pad.
That's what they were given when they began.
Maybe they started using tampons. So we need a lot of sensitization and advocacy around, just from now a health perspective. These are the products. If you're going to use this, this is how you should carry yourself, you know. If you're not going to use, if you have certain conditions, you shouldn't use this. Girls don't know, and women, we really don't know a lot about that.
Yeah, I agree with you, and sometimes I feel like part of our issues, what we experience sometimes, like I mentioned previously, is just lack of information. And I think the more there's information and people have been sensitized, even about what happened, you know, people, then the reaction is not going to be gory. It's not someone, it will be like, this is a natural process. This is something that happens to most, if not all, the women. So why are we shunning away from this? So if there's the support from the medical fraternity, and they're sitting down and they're backing up a bill such as this one, then it somewhat, for lack of a better word, puts a mark of quality, you know, on it.
It's like a KEB.
Yeah, so it's like a KEB, so it sort of legitimizes it a bit, and people are not going to be saying that it is Madam Gloria who is pushing her agenda.
You know, like when this thing happened, a very close friend of mine, a man, he was like, what? Oh, you can't be serious. No, but everybody knows their days. And he was so convicted. I said, go and ask your wife. Then he came back afterwards. He was like, you know, my wife is telling me that even the women in the market, how come we never see these things? the issue of how come we never see, then it doesn't exist.
Yes.
But you can imagine that was like a learning moment, even for him at that age. It was like, you mean people get accidents? You mean people bleed that much? You mean? So I think the medical fraternity needs to really be loud about this, about the sensitization of just menstrual hygiene products, and without having to endorse, or you know, we don't want you to endorse one and leave another. But tell me, if you use a cup, ABCD. If you use, like, I only learned in my adult years, because there's a time I had some hormonal imbalance issues, and that time my gyna told me, just be wearing panty liners throughout. So I was wearing panty liners throughout, but I kept on having like UTIs.
Yes.
Then I'm taking yogurts, it's not going away. And then just a lady friend was like, but you need to stop wearing these panty liners, especially this one. This one has so-and-so product. It will just keep irritating you, but I had to learn through.
And you had to learn through it. And listen, I think that's the key part about, I think, what the point is. I think at the end of the day, lack of information is obviously fueling some of these stereotypes and some of the discrimination that we go through as women, not even just from men, but from even fellow women. Because there's, you know, my people fail because of lack of knowledge. Exactly. So we are sitting around with our heads buried in the sand because it's considered a taboo thing. And when my wife gets her period, you know, she hides away in the corner. I don't even know. Hata sijuangi, hata sionangi. She resurfaces after 4 days, after 3 days after that. But like we started off saying, we can count the number of women globally, actually, who may not have had an accident. I think we can count it in one hand, but it is something that happens a lot to everybody. So we are going to move on to the next question, and I think our next question is from Malika.
Hello, Senator. First of all, I want to give you kudos for what you're doing. You're being a voice to some of us who've been going through this stuff, and keep going in the fight. I have two questions, though. My first question is, do you think Kenya will get to the point where, when we go to airports, you see how when you go to the lavatory room, you see the condom display. Do you think we'll get to the point where we see a tampon display or a panty liner display or even a sanitary towel display? Because it's quite sad, and it's a challenge actually for most women, especially during travels here and there. And the second question I have, countries such as South Korea, Indonesia, and Spain recently have bills to give women paid leaves during their menstrual cycles. Do you see it reaching a point where Kenya will be there? Because there's only one African country, Zambia, that has that law. So do you feel that with your agenda, tunaweza fika hapo, we can be the second African country?
We'll be getting a few days off, you know, especially for people who have, you know, really bad cramps. I remember, I think in high school, I used to be in the sanatorium for the 4 days. And of course, when you're dealing with that and you have a male teacher, wangesema, wacha kujifanya. Kwani nini mbaya na wewe? Wacha kujifanya. So do you feel like we may ever get there?
First of all, I feel like I'm going to be bashed for this answer.
Yes.
On the leave days, I am not quite sure I support it. Like, I know it sounds very shocking, being the person that walked into parliament with my stain. I feel like supporting it on one hand, yes, I understand, but then I get very bad cramps. And they used to be consistent, and then I gave birth and something happened.
And then they disappear.
They didn't disappear, but it was like, you get them, you don't get them. But I feel like, you know, you have sick leave days, right? Because you're sick, so you get leave days, you stay home. Or you have your normal 21 days you have to go spend with your family, which is there. Or you have, like, someone has died in your family and it's a tragic event, and then you go, right? So where would you place periods? So for me, I feel like asking for leave days goes against everything I believe, particularly anything I can do. Anything you can do, I can do bleeding.
Yeah.
So anything you can do, meaning you work, then I should be able to work bleeding. So I don't know how I feel about that. I just feel like it will be like, oh, you know, like, it's like when you're pregnant, then I can't work, you know? So it's like a very progressive approach. For them, it works. I think I would not want for people to see me as a sick person when I'm on my period.
Yeah.
I think I'd want them to see me as a person that's just going through a natural process and help me going through it as I continue working. Like now the provision of the pads. If it has happened, I'm here, I'm shooting, there should be like sanitary pad
dispensers that she's
dispenser
talking
that
about,
I can just take and wear and then come back on set and be like, let's finish this. I don't feel like you should send me away because I'm sick. So that's my feeling towards that. Will we get to a place where we will have like sanitary dispensers everywhere? You know, everyone expects government to be, first who's government? Serikali tusaidi, serikali ni nani? Kila mtu ni serikali. I'm government, you're government. Like, so now I've been asking people, I've had this in my house. If you've come to my house like since forever, I always have pads. Like in my toilet, in all my toilets I have pads. I put tampons, I put like a whole kit for women because I'm like, anything can happen when you've come to visit me and I don't want to subject you to that shame. So what are you doing in your space? Like in my office, I have pads in my drawers. People know that if you want to have their pads, ukifanyikiwa, you go, you take there. In the spaces that I can, I've changed it with my ability. When you say serikali tusaidie, so now who is serikali?
Yes.
Because even now the bill that I'm pushing is for primary and secondary school girls in government schools. I'm not pushing it for girls in the private schools. I'm not pushing it for girls in the marketplace or women who are not in school. So someone else has to, like, it has to be a collective effort.
Yes.
It has to start from here. We are in Ma Hotel. Well, you know, we should push them, like, put sanitary, you people, your profit margins are high enough to put for us a dispenser of pads in your, and in any case, the people coming to a hotel like this are not coming specifically just to take pads. They actually, you know, so it has to be a collective effort.
Yes.
And I think my question will be back to you, like, in your space, what are you doing? Do you have, assuming you have your car, do you have pads in your car for people in your car? You know, assuming you have your small startup somewhere, do you have pads there? Assuming even, forget your parents' home, yeah? You can tell them, yeah, you bought for me. And how about my friends who come and visit? So put for them pads there.
The next question is from Hazel. I believe it's Hazel's question.
Hi, Senator.
Hey.
First of all, you're a phenomenal woman. Love that.
Thank you.
So my question is basically around sensitization. So personally, when I started my period, it was in class 6. So at that time, my mama, of course, had told me, yes, when you start bleeding, you have to put on a pad. But I felt like the education system would at least also give me some information, because the only thing I knew is I didn't even know there were even cramps. I just know when I bleed, I have to put on a pad. So do you think that the education system should also be involved in this, in sensitizing young girls about periods and what goes on? Like even right now, there's some products you can use right now and they harm you. So do you think the education system should also get involved in sensitizing young girls?
Yeah.
Good question.
So they have right now, of course, the biology class, which is like a hair, man, woman, and all that. But part of my bill also stipulates that the advocacy be taken down to the schools, so that there's like more information. It's not just the biology of it, this is how you get children, but how to handle now the menstrual hygiene. So that's part of my bill. That's why I felt that looking at menstruation, it can't be an amendment into an education act or another act. It has to be a standalone, because there's so much that you need to put in. And in fact, as a matter of fact, it would be too much to say there has to be a whole class for that. But there has to be a whole class for reproductive health for both men and for both the boys and the girls, because also the period shaming and the stigma starts because the boys are you're normally told, so the boys, you need to move out to ongelesha wasichana. And then when you've moved them out, you've totally, that's the whole stigma right there.
Them, yes. Yeah.
So that's part of what I'm pushing for in the bill, so that it accommodates. How do we conduct this reproductive health talks? How do we talk about menstruation with the boy child? Right now, when I distribute pads, I go with my son, and he's 15 years. And because I already, all the time in the schools I've gone, I find them wamekwa wasichana peke yao. So I'm trying to change that notion. But now it's like, I have to ask the girls, are you guys okay? I have someone who wants to talk to you, and he happens to be a boy. So far, it's been good reception. So he'll go in, he won't say much because again, you know what our boy is telling us about our periods. But he'll be like, listen, we understand, we know, and we brought pads, this is how we are distributing. So, you know, when you bring them into the scene, you're normalizing it.
Yes.
So it's the same way now we're talking about this, and I hope, like, this is a day show, right?
Yes.
So normally this wouldn't be a day show, like this would be like past 10:30. This
would be like at 11:30 Uko with advertisements of alcohol. No.
Yeah, it would be like, you know, so, yes. So we're already normalizing the conversation, which is a first step. Yes. The moment we bring in the boy child, the whole issue on stigma and shame will just end.
Yeah.
Yes. If that day I was so shameful and I would have gone into the car and gone, we wouldn't be sitting here. There would be no conversation about period poverty. There'll be nothing to do with the budgets going up. The 1 billion that has been promised to us for the year 2023-24 would not have been 1 billion because they would have bought more condoms instead of pads. So just that one thing of saying, I'm going to be shameless, I'm going to be fearless, and I'm going to, this is for the movement, for the cause that I believe in, has now spurred up all this, it's like a big impact.
Wow.
Yeah. So dare to be shameless.
Dare to be shameless. I love that. I love that. That's such a nice place to end. I don't think I can add anything else. Dare to be shameless. Dare to be fearless in the pursuit of your cause, what you believe in. So I wonder, what are your thoughts about the episode today and any other episode that we've aired before? Of course, feel free to reach us on all our social media platforms at KBC Channel 1. So on behalf of my wonderful team at KBC Channel 1, Senator Gloria over here with me, our location partner Ma Hotel and Suites, and myself, Ashiko Mbune, I wish you all a fearless and a shameless week ahead. I'll catch you guys next Sunday. Bye-bye.